Hello, and thanks for joining us in the Texas Balance of State training. All HMIS users are required to complete this training in full before gaining access to HMIS. Texas Homeless Network takes this training very seriously, and we want all of our staff members as well as all Balance of State Client Track users to understand their responsibilities. This training is based on privacy and security standards set forth by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which I'll be referring to as HUD from here on out. Okay, let's get started with some data security basics. Each of us collects, manages, and transfers sensitive data every day, whether we realize it or not. When you collect personal information from a client, create a new password for your account on a website, or when you email a coworker a spreadsheet. These moments all make us vulnerable to a data breach. Today, I want to highlight some reasons that data security is important and also walk through some of those small steps that we can take to keep our data secure. Let's talk about why data security is important. I want you to imagine a scenario where you drive your vehicle to the grocery store, and once you're inside, you suddenly realize that you forgot to lock your car, and in fact, the driver's door is wide open and the keys are still in the ignition. You would panic and run outside, right? This is the attitude that we should have regarding the protection of our digital valuables as well as our physical ones. We should be concerned with protecting our clients' sensitive data, maintaining our agency's reputation, which might play into maintaining funding. And not only is data security good practice from a business perspective, but it's also often a legal requirement. So here we have the 6 most common reasons for a Hipaa data violations and fines. While many of our HMIS users are not responsible for Hipaa compliance, these examples do a great job of showing us how most of these data breaches are happening on the employee level. So we have a stolen laptop or smartphone or USB device, a malware incident, ransomware attack or hacking, an office break-in, sending data to the wrong patient or contact, and social media posts. The truth is that over half of all data breaches at small and medium-sized companies are caused by negligent employees. We know that employees are a company's greatest asset, but they are also its greatest security risk. So with that in mind, we need to be more cognizant and think about security as a mindset. So let's think twice and create some good data habits. We should beware of phishing scams and learn how to spot and react to any suspicious emails. We need to avoid opening unusual email attachments, so make sure that you know the sender before you open any attachments. And when in doubt, you can always contact the sender to verify that they actually sent you that email. You should work on unsecured networks with caution. So if you're working remotely at a coffee shop or on their public Wi-Fi, you should be cognizant of what information you are sharing over that network. You should ensure that no longer used data is completely removed and cannot be recovered by unauthorized people. And we should create copies of data on a separate device for recovery in case data is lost, stolen, or compromised. It's best to back up regularly on a different device, like maybe an external hard drive or the cloud, in case of a really bad day, like in this photo. Let's talk about the specific criteria you need to hit for your client track password. Your password will require a minimum of 8 characters, though best practice is 10 characters. You'll need a minimum of 1 number, capital letter, and symbol. When changing passwords, you can't use any of the last 6 that you've used, and passwords expire every year. The HMIS Help Desk does not know your password, and we cannot give you your old password if you forget it or lose it. For added security, the password is not allowed to be retrieved. You can reset your password using the recovery information option. Lastly, as a security precaution, never save passwords to your computer. Here are some of the baseline requirements that we expect from you as an HMIS user. Do not access HMIS client data on a public computer, for example, the library. Do not access HMIS client data in a public setting, like maybe a coffee shop. Do not access HMIS client data over unsecured public Wi-Fi, like perhaps free city Wi-Fi. And do not access HMIS on computers that do not have a lock screen. These are your responsibilities as an HMIS user. You should take appropriate measures to prevent unauthorized data disclosures, report any security violations to hmis@thn.org, and comply with relevant policies and procedures. Let's talk about sharing user IDs. Only volunteers who have completed this training in its entirety and signed the user volunteer agreement are allowed to use HMIS. And the importance of that is accountability and clarity. It wouldn't be fair to the clients that we serve if we are not taking their privacy seriously and respecting that each user who logs into HMIS has taken the appropriate training and understands the responsibilities of having that HMIS login. So here's a screenshot of the Texas Balance of State COC HMIS Volunteer User Agreement. This is the digital document that you must sign and submit as part of your training in order to gain access to HMIS. I did want to quickly walk through the very last part of the user agreement, the signatures section. Since many of us are working remotely these days due to the pandemic, there is a workaround to collecting these digital signatures. Obviously, you will type your own name into the HMIS user signature field, but if you're not in the same physical space as your direct supervisor or HMIS administrator, you can gain verbal consent from these individuals and then type their name into the box for them. If you're unsure who your local HMIS administrator is, ask your direct supervisor, and if you still are not sure, you can contact us at hmis@thn.org. Next, let's review steps to keep client information safe. Do not leave sensitive information lying around, including on printers, fax machines, or copiers. Secure any paper or other hard copy containing PPI, which stands for Protected Personal Information. Lock up portable equipment and all sensitive materials, and lock doors and make sure to take those keys out of the drawers. I wanted to quickly go over timeliness with you. Timeliness is so important when striving for accurate data. Data entered in a timely manner reduces human error that occurs when too much time has elapsed between data collection and data entry. It's so easy to forget service dates, referral dates after a few days, especially if you're working in a hectic or busy work environment. So therefore, the sooner the data is entered, the better chance the data will be correct. Timely data entry also ensures that the data will be accessible when it's needed for monitoring purposes or meeting funder requirements or responding to requests for information. So ideally, we will complete all data entry in HMIS at the time of service, meaning direct data entry. This helps us cut down on paper use and also human error. However, there are occasional circumstances that prevent us from doing direct data entry. If you must do delayed data entry, it's incredibly important that all HMIS workflow questions are represented on your paper intake form. In order to comply with reasonable quality standards, THN has established the following policy regarding client record data entry. So, emergency shelter, homelessness prevention, and rapid rehousing projects must enter all information within 1 business day. Coordinated entry, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, outreach, and supportive services only must enter all intake and assessments information within 3 business days. So if we wait longer than that, we run the risk of the client being gone, so we can't ask any potential follow-up questions. Let's quickly talk about the difference between ethical and unethical data use. So what does it look like to use data ethically? We should use data from client records to match the client with relevant services and to refer the client to organizations within the same homeless response system and to check in on clients. Using data unethically looks like denying services because of race, ethnicity, or gender identity, providing data to third parties, using data from client record to harass clients, and entering clients into HMIS under another user's login. So no HMIS user should ever use someone else's login information, nor should they let another person use their login information. And finally, if you need to report any unethical behavior in HMIS, you can send an email to us at hmis@thn.org. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to navigate within ClientTrack, as well as some basic user menu options. When you first log on to ClientTrack, you're going to get dropped off onto what ClientTrack calls the home workspace. There are multiple workspaces in ClientTrack, but this is the one that you always start off in. You can always tell what workspace you're in by hovering over the Workspace button, or by opening up the menu panel on the left side of your screen. The home workspace is where you're able to do things like look at your current enrollments and case assignment list, as well as change your password and any of your security information. Front and center is the user dashboard, where you can see the number of cases and clients per program. If you notice a difference between the number of cases and the number of clients, the way to think about it is this way. Cases are the number of families in each program. Clients is the individual count of people in that program. Below that is a box called My Case Assignments. Each time you do an intake for a client in the system, ClientTrack will ping you or mark you as that client's case manager. We're going to look at a way that you can edit this list later on if you need to switch a case assignment to someone else in the system. Let's take a look at some of those menu options before we move on to the next workspace. So you need to make sure your menu panel on the left-hand side of your screen is open in order to access menu options. Do this by clicking on the square icon with 3 bars to expand the menu. Then you're going to click on the thumbtack icon to pin the menu into place. Underneath that is a menu option called Recent, which shows you the most recent clients that you've looked at in HMIS. It also shows you the most recent referral providers you've looked at, and if you're in a shelter or housing program, it'll also show you the most recent housing facility you've looked at. If you want to go to a particular client or provider or shelter, you would simply click on the record. Further down the list, you'll see My Information. This is a place where you can change your personal user information such as your name and email address. Keeping your email address up to date is incredibly important, as this email address is what we will use to send you things like mandatory HMIS trainings or urgent notifications. You'll also notice on your left-hand menu panel that you have the Change My Password option. Now let's take a look at different workspaces. As mentioned before, ClientTrack is separated into different workspaces, each one with different purposes and menu options. The home workspace has menu options geared toward users like your case assignment list, but what if you wanted to look at specific clients or providers? You would need to be in a completely different workspace. To switch workspaces, we're going to click on the blue Workspace button near the top left of the screen. This button may look a little different depending on whether or not you have your left-hand menu panel open. This button is extremely important, and it serves as one of 2 ways to navigate to other areas of ClientTrack. You can also use the keyboard shortcut, which is the Control button and the up arrow. When you click the Workspace button, you are taken into what ClientTrack calls the Workspace Carousel. Each white box in the carousel represents a different workspace. Notice here that I have a housing box. This workspace will only appear if you have a shelter or housing program at your facility. You'll also notice that some of the workspaces have mini icons to the right of the box. When you want to work with client information or do intakes for new clients, you need to be in the Clients workspace. Now, I'm not going to cover the actual intake or any of the menu options here in this video. We're going to do that in a later video, but I do want you to notice how each of these workspaces looks different. Unlike the home workspace, the client workspace has the client ID, basic demographic information about the client, enrollment information, and service information. All of this is on the client dashboard. In the housing workspace, you would see information about the specific facility, how many beds are available, and how many people are checked into those beds. And in the providers workspace, you can find specific providers and the referrals that have been made to that provider. In the reports workspace, this is where all of our reports are located. So if you have to run any report for your clients or your program or your facility, you're going to come to this reports workspace to find them. I also wanted to cover the resources workspace. Here you can find short video tutorials about various aspects of the system. The videos are broken down into basic, intermediate, and advanced. And the videos themselves are embedded into the workspace, so there's no need to leave client track, which might sound a little sinister, but this feature is meant to make your HMIS experience more convenient. You'll also find documentation, such as the training request form, program manuals, and user agreements. Before we move on, there's one additional thing I wanted to cover, and that's this utility bar in the top right corner of your screen. There's a lot of helpful buttons here, so let's first talk about the notification bell. This is where you would get notifications about clients. So if one of your clients is auto-exited from a program, you can expect to see a notification here about your client. Your name is also a link that you can click. If you have more than one work group, say you have the Housing and Shelter Programs work group as well as the Coordinated Entry work group, you would be able to switch between work groups using this drop-down menu. Keep in mind that depending on what work group you're in, you're going to see different things in your workspace. Most users only have access to one or two work groups at a time. If you are a monitor supervising grantees, you may have more than one organization assigned to you. This is usually for reporting purposes. So you would also want to switch your organization from the drop-down menu if you were going to run a report on a specific agency. Once you've made your selections, you would hit this apply button so that they would go into effect. This apply button also kind of works as a refresher button. So if there's a glitch in HMIS for whatever reason, hopefully that won't happen, but it's happened from time to time, you can try clicking this apply button and that will kind of refresh the page for you. You'll also notice there's another place to change your password right here. Help is also a link that you can click on. And when you do, a box pops up with a number of different options. The first three options, report an issue, ask a question, and make a suggestion. All three of these options look and operate essentially the same way in practice, and they all go to the same place when you submit them. This is how you would submit a ticket to us at hmis@thn.org. So when you click one of these options, and for this example I'm going to click report an issue, another box pops up, and it looks sort of like an email template. So you're going to give your help ticket a title, and then you're going to explain the issue you're having in the larger blue text box. And you want to make sure to include all relevant details like what page you're on, the client ID, or what you're trying to accomplish, and what error message you might be seeing. You want to make sure to put your email address, your phone number, and again, when you submit this ticket, we're going to get it directly in our email. Before starting an intake, it's a good idea to search for the client to make sure that they are not already in the system. Click on the blue magnifying glass in the top left-hand corner of your screen to search for a client. My advice here is to search broadly. Do not search with all of these fields filled out. There are instances where a client's name may be misspelled, they may not have their social security number in the system, or it may have been mistyped. Sometimes people's last names change due to marriage or divorce. It's also possible that they might not have their birth date entered in the system, or it could have been entered incorrectly. Just to clarify, if you were to search with one of these fields, for instance, the social security number, and the client was previously in the system but didn't have their social security number listed in the system, this client wouldn't come up for you to find, even if you spelled their name correctly. So the broader, the better. We suggest starting with the first few letters of the first name and the first few letters of the last name. I know my client's social security number, so I'm going to type in the last 4 digits here. I also think it's a great idea for you to search more than once if you don't find your client the first time. If you do find your client, simply click on their record to be taken to their dashboard. If you didn't find the client, then you may need to enter them in from scratch. In this video, we're going to take a look at some basic case management menu options. We'll work our way down through the left-hand menu panel, covering the options that are most frequently used by new users in HMIS. Note that our client's enrollment is open. There is no project exit date listed. This is typically when all case management in HMIS happens with the client, while they are still active in the program. You might also notice that the program listed is different from the program you're training for, and that's okay. The case management menu options we review in this video work the same for all program types. If you need to update or edit any basic demographic information about your client, click on Edit Client. This is going to take you to the same page we saw during the initial intake. So if a client refused to give you their social security number during your first interaction, but shared that information on the third interaction, you can always come back to Edit Client and add that information in later. Adding case notes is fairly straightforward. Click on the Case Notes menu option, and then we're going to click on Add New Case Note. You'll be taken to a page that sort of looks like an email template. Fill out the Regarding field, and then in the larger blue text box, type out the case note itself. Save the case note when you're done. To print a case note, simply click on the checkbox to the right of the case note, and then click Print Selected. This is what the print preview would look like in Google Chrome. Next, let's look at how to add a service. We're going to click on Enrollment and Services, and then we'll click on Services. We actually have two options here, Add New Service and Quick Services. Add New allows you to add one service at a time, while Quick Services allows you to add multiple services at one time. Let's take a look at Add New first. The enrollment field is always required, so I'll select the enrollment that we just created. The grant is not required, so I'm not going to select it here, and we typically tell users not to fill this grant field out. Then you're going to select your service. The default for units of measure is count. I'm going to leave it at the default because that makes sense to me, but you can change the default as well. Last, let's cover units and unit value. These are asking two different things. Units is asking how many instances of this service did the client receive on this date. Unit value is asking how much does one instance of that service cost. To be clear, the Texas Balance of State COC does not have a set list of service values for the services listed in the system. Service values are determined by your agency. Agencies can decide to leave these fields at their defaults, and that's just fine. My only advice is just to be consistent. If you ever enter a unit value for one service for one client, then you should add the unit value for the same service for all of your clients. Any inconsistencies in unit values may affect your service reports. Save and close the page when you're done. Let's check out Quick Services. The enrollment is still required, so I'll select the enrollment again. From here, check off the services that the client received. Again, I'm going to leave units and unit value at their default, and then click Save and Close when done. You should see the client's services list update with the services that we just added.
In this video, we're going to cover how to add batch services to clients. Batch services are really useful when you want to group certain services together and add that entire group of services to a client all at the same time. So for example, let's say that after clients spend a week in my program, they automatically get a certain set of services. To create a batch, you'll go to Batch Services and then select Add New Batch. Name your batch, and you can also associate a program for this batch. This means that only clients who are in my emergency shelter program will be able to receive this particular batch. At the bottom of the screen is where you're going to select the services that are going to comprise the batch. Click on the magnifying glass, and then select your services from the list. You can also change the units and the unit value for each of these services. Once you're done, select Save. We can now see our newly created batch. To add clients to that batch, click on the blue action button and select Add Clients to Batch. The first portion of the screen is where you're going to find your client. If you know the client's ID, you can type it in the Client ID box, and when you click outside of the box, their information will then appear below. Once you're done, select Save. You'll notice that you'll remain on the Batch Services page. The useful thing about batch services is that you don't actually have to be on that particular client's dashboard for you to enter them into the batch. You can search and add any client to the batch, regardless of who is listed as your current client near the top left corner. You can also click on the magnifying glass and search for your clients by name, social, or birth date. Once you have searched for and found your client, you can go ahead and select them, and again, their information is going to appear near the bottom of the page. So even though this is a completely different client from our current client listed in the top left corner, we can still add them to the batch from this page. This way you can go through an entire list of clients without having to go back and forth between their dashboards. Click on Cancel to exit the batch. Now when we look at our client's dashboard, we can see he has the group of services that we put into the batch.